We romanticize the Wild West as lawless gunslingers and dusty saloons. But what if the real story wasn't about violence? It was about survival mastery. Cowboys, frontiersmen, and pioneers faced conditions that would kill most modern preppers in days. No supply chains, no rescue helicopters, no internet. Just thousands of miles of hostile terrain where one mistake meant death. In this video, you'll discover 10 forgotten cowboy survival methods that have been lost to time, techniques so effective they could still save your life today. And at the end, a surprising truth. The Old West wasn't one with guns. It was one with knowledge we've almost completely forgotten. 1. The water glass test, instant poison detection. Before water filters or chemical tests, cowboys developed a method to detect dangerous water in seconds. The water glass test wasn't folklore, it was frontier chemistry that could save your life. A small piece of polished metal, usually silver or brass, was placed in suspect water for exactly 3 minutes. If the metal showed discoloration, specifically a dark tarnish or greenish film, the water contained sulfur compounds or heavy metals that could cause severe illness or death. But the sophistication went deeper. Cowboys carried multiple test metals because different contaminants reacted with different materials. Copper detected certain bacteria, silver revealed arsenic, iron showed alkaline content that could cause digestive issues. Each metal became a specialized sensor. The most experienced frontiersmen could identify water sources by temperature, taste, and nearby vegetation before even testing. But the metal test was final confirmation, a process that took 3 minutes versus modern water testing kits that require shipping to laboratories. Some cowboys kept their test metals on watch chains or hat bands, always accessible, never forgotten. Others carved small pouches into their belts, specifically for carrying test metal sets. The system was simple, portable, and infinitely reusable. For modern preppers carrying expensive filtration systems that can fail or run out, this cowboy technique offers instant verification using nothing but a piece of metal you can carry forever. When you're not sure if that creek water will make you sick, 3 minutes and a silver coin can tell you everything you need to know. 2. The doubled hat canteen, wearable water storage. Cowboys didn't just wear wide-brimmed hats for sun protection. The Stetson was engineered survival equipment that few modern survivalists understand. The secret was in the construction. Quality cowboy hats had a double-layered crown with a sealed air gap. This wasn't decorative, it created a waterproof reservoir that could hold up to a quart of water without leaking. In emergencies, a cowboy could fill his hat through a small concealed opening, then seal it with a leather plug. The water stayed cool from evaporation through the outer layer while remaining drinkable inside. He could wear it all day, his emergency water supply literally on his head. The genius was the dual-purpose design. Normal wear? It's a hat. Water emergency? It's a canteen. No extra weight to carry, no additional gear to lose. Some cowboys even treated the inner lining with pinyon pine sap to improve waterproofing and add antibacterial properties. Trail-wise, cowboys would fill their hat reservoirs at every reliable water source, essentially carrying an extra quart without adding to their pack weight. The water in their canteens was for drinking. The water in their hats was insurance. Modern survival gear requires dedicated containers that add weight and can be lost. Cowboys built survival into equipment they already wore. That's not primitive, that's integrated systems thinking. For modern preppers carrying multiple water bottles, this frontier technique offers something elegant, emergency water storage that requires no extra gear and can never be forgotten at camp. 3. Bandana water wells, harvesting moisture from nothing. Cowboys collected water where modern survivalists see only dust. The bandana well technique harvested moisture from seemingly dry terrain using nothing but fabric and understanding of physics. The method exploited temperature differentials. Before dawn, when air temperature dropped but ground retained day heat, moisture would condense on specific surfaces. Cowboys would dig shallow depressions, line them with bandanas, and place small weights in the center. By dawn, condensation on the fabric would collect and run toward the weighted center, creating a small reservoir. In ideal conditions, a single bandana could collect 2 to 4 ounces of water overnight. Cowboys would use multiple bandanas, creating a collection system that could yield a pint or more, but they understood variables modern survivalists miss. Soil type mattered enormously. Sandy soil released moisture faster. Clay held it tighter. Fabric weave affected collection rates. Tight weaves collected more. Even colors influenced results, with darker fabrics attracting more dew. Location made dramatic differences. Slight depressions collected more than flat ground. Areas downwind from vegetation produced better yields. Some cowboys enhanced the system by creating rock arrangements that generated micro-cold zones, increasing condensation rates. The most sophisticated practitioners could read terrain and predict which locations would produce the most water. They'd set up collection systems before sunset, then collect at first light before heat caused re-evaporation. For modern survivalists focused only on finding surface water, this cowboy technique offers something critical: moisture collection that works in deserts where no water source exists. When your canteen runs dry and there's no creek for miles, knowing how to pull water from the air itself can mean the difference between life and death. 4. Tobacco poultice medicine. Frontier antibacterial treatment. This sounds disgusting until you understand the chemistry. Cowboys use tobacco poultices not from habit, but because they work better than most alternatives available. Nicotine is a powerful natural insecticide and antibacterial compound. When mixed with saliva enzymes and applied to wounds, it created a paste that prevented infection in an era before antibiotics. The process: chew tobacco until thoroughly saturated, apply directly to cleaned wound, cover with cloth, replace twice daily. But cowboys understood nuance modern survivalists miss. Different tobacco types had different properties. Virginia tobacco for deep cuts, burley for surface abrasions. Some even mixed tobacco with yarrow for clotting, or sage for additional antibacterial properties. The most sophisticated application was for venomous bites. Tobacco poultice drew venom from snake or spider bites more effectively than many modern treatments. Multiple frontier medical journals documented cases where this treatment saved lives when nothing else was available. Some cowboys kept separate tobacco specifically for medical use, never smoked, always kept clean and dry. Others learned which wild tobacco species grew in different regions and how to identify them for emergency use. For modern survivalists dependent on antibiotic ointments with expiration dates, this cowboy knowledge offers something remarkable: antibacterial treatment that never expires and grows wild across most of North America. When your medical kit runs out, this knowledge could be the difference between infection and recovery. 5. The Dutch oven forge. Portable metalworking system. Cowboys turned cooking equipment into metalworking tools. The Dutch oven wasn't just for food, it was a portable forge that could repair critical gear anywhere on the trail. The technique required understanding heat management. The standard Dutch oven, buried halfway in coals with additional coals on the lid, could reach temperatures sufficient to soften iron and steel. Cowboys would collect charcoal from old campfires and pack it around the oven with strategic air gaps, creating sustained high heat. Inside this improvised forge, metal could be heated, shaped, and tempered. Broken tools were repaired, horseshoes were reshaped, wagon parts were mended, even basic knives could be forged from salvaged metal. The sophistication came from understanding metallurgy without formal training. Cowboys learned to read metal color to determine temperature. Orange-red for shaping, bright red for welding. They understood quenching techniques that hardened cutting edges. Some trail crews carried minimal spare parts because they could fabricate replacements from raw materials. A broken axle could be reinforced. A snapped chain could be repaired. The most skilled practitioners could even create new tools from found metal. Abandoned wagon parts became knives, awls, or specialized tools. The beauty of the system was its simplicity. No specialized equipment needed beyond what was already in camp. The same Dutch oven that cooked breakfast could repair a broken tool by lunch. Cowboys didn't carry separate solutions for different problems. They carried understanding of how materials work. For modern survivalists carrying expensive multi-tools and spare parts, this cowboy knowledge offers something different: the ability to repair or create metal tools anywhere using equipment already in your camp kitchen. The Dutch oven stops being just a cooking pot and becomes a complete metalworking shop. 6. Horsehair fishing systems. Complete fishing kit from one source. Cowboys turned their horses into mobile fishing supply factories. A single horse provided everything needed for a complete professional-grade fishing system. The process began with selecting specific tail hairs, not just any hair, but the longest, straightest strands from the upper tail section. These hairs had specific properties: strength, flexibility, and near invisibility in water that modern monofilament tries to replicate. Individual hairs became leaders for small fish. Braided combinations created lines strong enough for larger catches. Cowboys developed specific braiding patterns that added strength without bulk. 3-strand for general use, 5-strand for heavier fish, 7-strand for exceptional strength. Hooks came from horse bones, specifically from the leg joints. Small bones were carved and shaped into barbed hooks, surprisingly effective for their size. The natural curve of certain bones made perfect hook shapes with minimal carving. Lures were created from horsehide strips dyed with plant materials to create flash and movement. Some cowboys would attach small fragments of metal to hide strips, creating primitive spinners that attracted fish through reflection and vibration. The complete system fit in a pocket, but provided professional-level fishing capability. Line, hooks, and lures, all from a single horse, renewable as the animal's hair grew back. Some cowboys even developed preferences. Certain horses produced better fishing materials based on breed, diet, and care. The most experienced practitioners could set up a complete fishing operation in minutes, using nothing but materials from their horse and basic carving tools. They weren't carrying fishing gear, they were carrying the knowledge of how to create it. For modern survivalists carrying expensive fishing kits with finite supplies, this cowboy knowledge offers something elegant, a complete fishing system renewable from an animal they might already have. When your fishing line breaks or hooks are lost, knowing how to harvest replacements from your horse means you're never without fishing capability. 7. Friction fireboards with memory. Self-improving fire starting. Cowboys didn't just make fire with friction, they created reusable fireboards that improved with use, eventually starting fires in seconds. Modern survivalists using friction once and discarding the materials missed the entire sophistication. The secret was board selection and conditioning. Specific wood species were chosen for base and spinner. Cottonwood base with yucca spinner, willow base with sage spinner. Each combination had different properties for different conditions, but the genius was in the wear pattern. The divot created during fire starting wasn't damage, it was improvement. After dozens of uses, the divot reached an optimal shape that concentrated heat perfectly. Experienced cowboys' fireboards worked dramatically faster than new ones. Some boards were documented with hundreds of uses. They became personal equipment, sometimes inherited. A well-worn fireboard was valuable because it represented reliability, proven through extensive use. Cowboys marked their boards with notches indicating successful fires. Not decoration, but quality verification. They also understood environmental factors. Humid conditions required different pressure and speed than dry conditions. Altitude affected oxygen available for combustion. Some cowboys kept multiple boards optimized for different weather conditions. One for dry desert, another for humid forests, a third for high altitude. Storage mattered too. Boards kept dry and protected lasted indefinitely. Some cowboys sealed worn boards with minimal rendered fat to prevent splitting while maintaining friction properties. The boards traveled in special pouches that protected them from moisture and impact. For modern survivalists struggling with one-time friction fire attempts, this cowboy knowledge offers something valuable: fire-starting equipment that improves rather than degrades, eventually becoming nearly foolproof. Your fireboard isn't wearing out, it's being perfected through use. 8. Star notch navigation. Carved precision direction finding. Cowboys didn't just use stars for general direction, they created precision navigation systems carved directly into their equipment. Star notches turned any tool into a navigation instrument, accurate to within degrees. The technique used knife handles, gun stocks, or belt buckles carved with specific angular measurements. These notches aligned with key stars at known positions throughout the year, creating measurement tools that worked anywhere under clear sky. The sophistication came from understanding stellar motion, different stars at different times of year, seasonal variations, latitude adjustments. Cowboys carved multiple reference notches for different conditions, essentially creating personal navigation computers from simple tools. To navigate, a cowboy would sight down his notched tool, aligning specific notches with specific stars. The resulting angle indicated precise directions. Some tools had notches for all cardinal and intercardinal directions, giving 8-point precision, but the system went beyond simple direction. By measuring angles between stars using the notch spacing, cowboys estimated time until dawn, predicted optimal travel times, and even calculated latitude changes on long journeys. The most sophisticated users created personal systems customized for frequently traveled territories. Some cowboys developed notch systems so refined they could navigate to specific ranches or water sources by star navigation alone. They'd carve detailed angular measurements representing landmarks across hundreds of miles of territory. Their tools became physical maps encoded in notches. Creating a notched tool required careful observation and precise carving over time. But once complete, it provided navigation capability that worked for decades with zero maintenance and no dependence on external systems. For modern travelers dependent on GPS that fails without satellites or power, this cowboy technique offers something remarkable: precision navigation requiring only clear sky and a tool you can make yourself, working anywhere on Earth. 9. The audio perimeter alarm. Sound-based security without technology. Cowboys created security systems using natural materials that modern motion sensors still can't match. The audio perimeter wasn't technology, it was acoustic engineering that provided 360-degree coverage with zero power requirements. The basic system used suspended materials arranged to create noise when disturbed, but the sophistication came from tuning these materials to create different sounds for different intrusions. Small stones in leather pouches hung at specific heights. Humans walking upright triggered sounds at one level, four-legged animals at another. Wind created distinctive sounds, different from purposeful movement. Experienced ears could identify threat type without looking. Spacing between alarm points created triangulation. Sound from multiple points revealed direction and speed of approach. Some cowboys could estimate the size of an approaching group by how many alarm points triggered and in what sequence. Material selection provided additional information. Dry seed pods sounded different from bells made from metal scraps. Different sounds indicated different perimeter zones. Inner perimeter had different alarm materials than outer perimeter, creating layered security. The most sophisticated systems incorporated natural sounds rather than eliminating them. Alarms were designed to sound almost natural, but with slight wrongness that trained ears instantly detected. Some trail bosses even created false perimeters, deliberately obvious alarm systems outside the real perimeter that would give false confidence to raiders while the real system remained hidden. Night guards would do periodic perimeter checks, not by walking the whole line, but by listening for the subtle ambient sounds each alarm point made in wind. If a sound was missing, it meant someone had removed that alarm itself, an alarm condition. The advantage over visual watching. Alarms worked in darkness, fog, and while sleeping. They required no attention until triggered. They created complete coverage with minimal materials that never needed batteries or maintenance. For modern preppers installing electronic security dependent on batteries, this cowboy technique offers something elegant: perimeter security, using materials found anywhere, requiring no power, never failing, and actually improving your situational awareness rather than replacing it. 10. The flour sack civilization, complete material utilization system. Cowboys transformed flour sacks into complete survival systems. One sack provided dozens of critical uses, demonstrating resource efficiency. Modern throwaway culture has completely forgotten. Flour sacks weren't just containers, they were designed as multi-use materials. The fabric was specifically woven cotton, strong and tight enough to hold fine flour, yet porous enough to breathe, making it perfect for numerous applications. When empty, cowboys had pre-sized, pre-made fabric for medical uses, excellent bandages and wound dressings, where the tight weave prevented infection. For water, canteen covers, filters, and evaporative cooling wraps, dampened and wrapped around water containers, they kept contents remarkably cool through evaporation. For clothing, multiple sacks sewn into shirts, pants, or underwear. Depression-era children wearing feed sack dresses weren't improvising. They were using materials as designed. For tools, carry bags, rope alternatives when cut into strips and braided, protective wrapping for fragile items. For shelter, multiple sacks stitched together created windbreaks, rain shields, or shade canopies. The material was surprisingly weather-resistant and durable, but the sophistication went further. Cowboys understood that flour residue in used sacks had value. Used sacks cleaned dishes better than empty ones. The residue improved some applications. Some frontier families never bought fabric. They accumulated flour sacks for quilts, curtains, and clothing. The system represented complete circular thinking. The container was as valuable as contents. Nothing was waste. Everything had multiple sequential uses. Flour companies eventually started printing decorative patterns on sacks because secondary uses were so common. Some cowboys carried empty flour sacks, specifically as general-purpose survival equipment. A few sacks in a saddlebag provided solutions for dozens of potential problems. Need a water filter? Flour sack. Need emergency bandage? Flour sack. Need shade cloth? Flour sack. Need rope? Cut and braid a flour sack. For modern consumers discarding packaging immediately, this cowboy philosophy offers something profound, viewing every material as the beginning of its usefulness, not the end. A single flour sack could serve a dozen critical survival functions before it finally wore out, and even then the worn fabric became rags, patches, or kindling. We look at the Wild West through the lens of Hollywood, shootouts, saloons, and lawlessness. But after exploring these 10 forgotten techniques, perhaps we should ask a different question. Who actually understood survival better? Cowboys facing raw frontier with primitive tools, or modern preppers surrounded by gear they don't fully understand? The Old West wasn't one with violence. It was one with knowledge. Knowledge of how to test water with a piece of metal, how to turn a hat into a canteen, how to pull moisture from desert air, how to transform a cooking pot into a forge, how to carve navigation into a knife handle, how to make a single flour sack serve a dozen purposes. Every technique we've explored reveals something modern survival culture has lost: the difference between having tools and being capable. Cowboys didn't carry survival kits. They carried knowledge. Their tools were simple because their understanding was deep. They didn't need specialized gear because they could turn anything into what they needed. A hat became water storage. A bandana became a well. A Dutch oven became a forge. A flour sack became a complete supply system. Today, we collect equipment. They developed capability. We buy solutions. They created them. We depend on supply chains. They were the supply chain. But here's what really matters. Every single technique in this video still works. None of them require electricity, factories, or modern materials. They represent human capability at its peak. not despite limitations, but because of them. The Wild West wasn't primitive. It was the last era where daily survival forced people to maintain complete capability. Knowledge couldn't be outsourced. Skills couldn't be downloaded. You either understood how the world worked, or you died. Modern preppers stockpile gear for collapse scenarios. Cowboys lived in those scenarios daily and thrived. They didn't prepare for survival, they embodied it. The irony is stark. We have more survival information available than any generation in history, yet less survival capability. Cowboys had almost no formal education, yet knew more practical survival than most modern survivalists ever will. They understood something we've forgotten in our gear-dependent culture. True survival isn't about having the right equipment, it's about being the right person. Someone who sees a hat and recognizes a water container, who sees a cooking pot and recognizes a forge, who sees a bandana and recognizes a water well, who sees a flour sack and recognizes 50 different uses. Someone who doesn't need specialized gear because they understand how materials actually work. The most dangerous mindset in survival isn't lack of gear, it's dependence on it. Cowboys with a knife, a bandana, and knowledge could survive anywhere. Modern preppers with thousands of dollars in equipment often can't survive a weekend without resupply. The difference isn't the tools, it's the understanding. So the question isn't whether these frontier techniques are still relevant. They are. The question is whether we're humble enough to learn from people we've been taught to view as backward, because in a world of increasing complexity and fragility, perhaps the Cowboys understood survival better than we do. They didn't survive despite having less. They thrived because they understood more. And that might be the most important frontier wisdom of all.